Hello, hello. Welcome back to the 2020 Rehab Your Life Virtual Summit. I am so excited to be offering these speakers to you. And guess what? I got another one. I've been coming back all day for over the 2 days, bringing you powerful speakers that are really helping me to enhance the offerings of Rehab Your Life. And remember what those four pillars are: rehab your career, rehab your money, rehab your relationships, and rehab your health. And so I have a special treat for you. Mrs. Voyd Bailey-Burks is here to share some information with you. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Voyd Bailey-Burks is an author, speaker, the founder of Sweetie, Sisters Worshiping, Encouraging, and Empowering Together International, and the CEO of Righteous Resources Consulting and Coaching, LLC. She is a graduate of Ohio University. And as a business consultant, she utilizes her skills acquired from corporate America as resources to provide strategies and systems to start, upgrade, and scale their businesses, as well as nonprofits, along with the use of her original vision strategy sessions, coupled with her vision strategy planner. Through ongoing vision strategy coaching, Voyd walks her clients through various processes as they learn to develop and implement strategies for their life, family, marriage, health, business, ministry, and more. So, without any further ado, I want to bring to the virtual stage Mrs. Voyd Bailey-Burks. Hey, Voyd, how are you?
How are you? I'm great. Thank
I'm
you for having
doing
me.
well. Thank you so much for making yourself available to participate in the summit. I've just been engaged in all kinds of, speakers helping me to be able to bring these things to life. So thank you so much. And so I see that your title is scrolling up across the bottom: Career and Family Transitions After a Medical Diagnosis. I am so excited to hear what you're going to say. So I am going to give you the virtual floor.
Awesome. Thank you. So, I want to start out just by throwing out a couple of words that come to mind when we think about what happens with a medical diagnosis. Depending on the type of diagnosis, it could first bring about shame, fear, guilt, anxiety, and then just the processing of having to sit your family down and talk through about the situation. Oftentimes, when we are faced with an unexpected medical diagnosis, especially if you're young, there isn't a plan of action in place. I want to share personal experience first and then kind of get into some other things. So, I want to share from the perspective of my own personal experience as a young wife and a young mother. I hadn't been married even 5 years at this point, and I had a 6 month old baby and a 4 year old son. And my husband started getting sick. We thought it was a flu or pneumonia, and he went to the doctor and he progressively got worse. They started sending him to specialists, running all types of tests. Everything was coming back, we don't know what's going on. We don't know what to call this. We've never seen this before. And so here I was, first of all, coming newly out of my job because we had decided to stay home, that I would stay home to take care of our children until they both were of school age, because I was working full time in corporate America, worked for two very good Fortune 500 companies. I was thriving, doing well, and excelling. And, having the babies and wanting to be home was a little bit more important at that juncture. So I was able to work from home for a while. And then, as things began to change, it was better for me to just pull back from work completely. So we were now a one income household, which means that our home solely, functioned off of my husband's income. So him getting sick, temporarily for a couple of weeks wasn't so bad. But as things progressed, and he was hospitalized multiple times. And during this last time, the doctor told me, Mrs. Burks, you need to call your family. You need to make arrangements because your husband is going to die. And I remember just kind of sitting there like, what are you talking about? How can this be? we're so young. We didn't have a plan of action. So, I had to learn very quickly how to navigate this unexpected season. So in the process of that, I had to figure out resources. I had to figure out what is, available to me in this situation. I already, because of his income, we did not qualify for a lot of the public assistance and different things like that. So I had to become creative to navigate the resources that were available to me. So once I tapped into some community resources, tapped into my people resources, etc., that kind of helped things. God is good, because in the end of all of that, my husband actually pulled through. They never were able to give this illness that he had a name. They just ran all these tests. All the x-rays and CT scans showed that it looked like his stomach had been shot up, and they asked multiple times, have you ever been shot in the stomach? He has never been shot in the stomach. So they didn't understand what we were dealing with, but he turned it around. God turned it around, and he was able to pull through that and fast forward us to, now a time in a season where we were growing in our family. We had moved to another city. Obviously, a part of that being for better employment. And so, life is moving along. We built a home. Everything was flowing well. And then here we are again with a medical situation. First, my own, with some autoimmune issues that took 9 years to get diagnosed. As a result of that, I was not, not 9 years. It took about 8 years for that to be diagnosed. So in the midst of all of that, not being able to re-enter the workforce because of all the illness, I was once again faced with, okay, what do we do to navigate this time? And so I remembered, okay, before when this happened, I tapped into my people resources. I tapped into my community resources, and started to get a plan of action in place, because we needed to know what to do and how to hold our family together, keep our family together, make sure that our children still were able to be children in the midst of all of the transitions that were happening. In the midst of my own medical issue, we became emergency foster parents for family members. So now we're faced with our two children, ourselves, and now a newborn baby and a 2-year-old, which had the newborn had a medical issue that we needed to work through. So again, it caused all types of transitions in our household. It caused us to have to rework our finances again. It caused us to have to learn how to be creative in bringing in income. And I want to take a moment, because what I found in my own personal experience was that when I began to look back over my life, I began to look at, why were we never prepared for something like this? Many of us grew up in homes where our parents and grandparents raised us to further our education. They encouraged us to attend college or to learn a skill or a trade to ensure that we made a good living. What they didn't tell us was, hey, if you get sick, you should still have a plan of action. You should still have a way to pay your bills. There should still be, beyond insurance, there should be something in place to make sure that all of your needs are met. That conversation was not had. As a matter of fact, I remember even as a child that when family members became ill and things like that happened, nobody said anything. As children, we just knew that something was going on. We just knew that something happened, but we didn't know the details, and we weren't given details. And if we were to ask questions in that time frame, we were told to stay in a child's place. So, when you grow up with that type of thinking and you begin to recognize that, we don't have a plan of action, we don't know what to do, you begin to think a little bit differently, which is what happened for me. I began to write down some things. I began to start making plans, trying to understand, how do I navigate this now new season that I'm in, where I thought I was going back into the workforce and then adding new family to the household. I was once again faced with, no, you have to stay home and make sure that the house flows. And so in the process of that, what I found was it was going to be important for me to develop a strategy and a plan. It was going to be important for me to begin to talk with my husband, and we together put some action things in place, so that in the event of sickness, death, or another crises, we were better prepared. What I found was, in talking with my parents and in talking with family members and friends, most people had nothing beyond the insurance that came with their job. So we then learned that is simply not enough. So I'm looking at, okay, as a result of all of the things that are going on, we are faced with losing a home, losing vehicles. What people don't think about in the crisis of a medical diagnosis, and how it deals and shifts your career or totally takes your career away, depending on what that diagnosis is. Most people don't think about the fact that this has a great impact on your marriage. It has a great impact on your children. The word that we utilize now, the terminology that we utilize now, this would be considered a trauma. And this is a trauma to a child who doesn't understand, and it's traumatic to a marriage, that may have already been thriving, or it's traumatic to a marriage that maybe already had some other type of issue. Thank God for us, we didn't have another issue. It was simply the medical diagnosis and how it affected our personal finances and the flow of our household. So, as I continue on, I want to talk about a couple of things, because when we don't have anything in place, when we don't plan for a medical diagnosis, we are basically setting ourselves up for failure. We're setting ourselves up that if you have to go to a family member or a friend, because you need somewhere to stay, because you've lost your housing, you're setting yourself up for another level of emotional, distraught behavior, interactions, conversations, angst, anxiety. All of those things start stirring up because now you are living in someone else's space. And so that causes another level of issue. As I continue on, one of the things that happens is that if there is no plan and you now have to move in with someone else, or God forbid, move into a shelter, or move to another city to try to gain better employment, sometimes the inability to secure sound employment in this time frame causes, again, great stress. So it leads to further breakdown in the family. It can lead to further breakdown in the marriage, your finances, and oftentimes your other relationships. And then it creates another level of health issue. Your mental health becomes challenged. Your physical health may become even more challenged as a result of that. So one of the things that I learned in this process, in my own personal situation, was that it wasn't enough for me to hope and dream, if you will, to one day get back to working in a secular or corporate position. I had to stop, take a step back, regroup, and look at everything that I had going on. So as I did that, I began to, I was praying, but I began to target my prayer. Okay, God, your scripture says, your word says, commit my plans to you and they will be successful. So here's a plan of action that I have so that I can be successful in my household, in my marriage, with my children, and as I navigate this medical diagnosis. Because what I didn't want to do was lose my marriage, cause additional trauma or stress to my children, or other family members. So I had to get creative very quickly. Now, because I already knew how to find resources, I already knew how to communicate what my needs were, I already knew how to, educate myself. If I couldn't go to school, I knew how to tap into other resources to continue my education and make myself still able to go back into the workforce at some point. So with that, what I learned was you need to learn how to take your skills that if you went to college, you have some skills that you acquired in college. If you learned a trade, you have skills that you acquired in that trade school or in that learning environment. So I learned to sit down, make a list of all of my skills. And so as I made a list of all of my skills, listen, people don't take into consideration homemaking is a skill. What do you do as a homemaker? What do you do as you're raising children? As you're navigating the various things that can come with running a household, there are specific type of skills that come with that. So I took those homemaking skills in addition to my education, in addition to the skills that I learned in corporate America, and I made a list. And as I made this list, I began to realize that my skills were transferable. So if I'm not able to go back into the regular workforce, I could create work for myself in a way to bring in income so that it would help to keep my family moving forward. That's how my business was birthed, Righteous Resources. It initially started as just connecting people to various community resources, helping people to communicate what their needs were, because I found that some people are not able to get their needs met in the midst of a tragic situation, or in the midst of a diagnosis or a health crisis with their child or whoever in the household. What I found was that some people just were not able to articulate what their needs were. And so what I began to do was, work with that person, and whatever the organization was, I would work with that person and kind of navigate the process with them to make sure that their need was met so that they could keep their home intact as much as possible. Um, you know, as I continued on navigating my own personal medical situation, things took another turn for the worse. My mother began to have some medical issues. And with her, again, I was faced with a situation where, because of her age and the symptoms that were being presented, they were not able to give a diagnosis. And so we went from doctor to doctor, medical practice to medical practice, just a whole series of things transpired over a span of years before we finally were able to get a doctor that would give us an appointment, give us a referral, I will say, to a very reputable hospital here in Ohio. So we went there, and she was able to get the appropriate testing needed and get the appropriate diagnoses, which by this point, she was in advanced stages of Lewy body and vascular dementia. So now we're dealing with, my health issues that were now under control, and now mom's health issues that were progressively getting worse. In addition to that, we're still navigating with fostering these other children and our children. And so it really put a strain on our household. It put a strain on our family. It put a strain on our finances. I am married happily to my husband, but there were times when it put a strain on our marriage because it was, taking away from those times of making sure that we spent time together, making sure that we kept having date night, making sure that we continued to do the things that we did before there was all the other additions to our family. And so as I reflected on that and I looked at these things that I had written down, I began to realize that Righteous Resources was so much bigger than just connecting people to the community resources. Because I was doing that, I began to coach people through various situations. I began to coach people through, okay, well, let's deal with this medical diagnosis, let's deal with this issue, and then let's figure out, if you can't go back into the regular workforce, what can you do? Is there a business that's already out there where you can become a consultant or, an affiliate, or is there a business on the inside of you that you've always wanted to start so that you can do that? So what I want to encourage you guys and what I want to stress as our time is drawing close, I want to stress that, for those of you who may be in a sandwich generation situation where you have your spouse and your parents and your children all in the home, you're kind of in the middle of everybody. So there's more of a opportunity that a medical diagnosis may occur. There's more of an opportunity that something like that would take place. So I want to encourage you that before you get into that situation, to put a plan of action in place, have a strategy, sit down with your family and have the hard conversation, because most times, as stated before, families do not talk about the what ifs, but we have to have those hard conversations. What do we do in the event that someone gets a medical diagnosis that could pull someone off of their job? What if, there's something that occurs that takes all of the income out? If you're a single parent home, that puts you at a greater, level of crisis, if something like that were to happen. So do you have something in place beyond your medical insurance that you get through your job? Do you have something in place beyond the life insurance or the AFLAC insurance that many of us have, through our employment? Is there something else in place? Is there something else that you can begin to implement now in the event of something like that happening down the line, that you already have another stream of income flowing, so that you're not stuck in a situation where there's no income? Perhaps you loved your career. I absolutely loved some of the things that I did in corporate America, which is another reason why my business came about, because I wanted to still do those things, but I wanted to do them in a way that wouldn't take away from my family, take away from my family time, that would cut down some of the stress that I was dealing with, because the job that I had was very stressful. So I encourage you to have a strategy, have a plan, you know, um, connect with some different resources in your community. For anybody who may currently be in a situation where you are losing the career that you had as you've known it, but you still desire to work in some capacity, you still desire to do the things that you loved in your career. Listen, if you've gone to college, nobody wants to see their degree go to waste. So I want to encourage you to make a list. What are all of your transferable skills? What is it that you've been doing? What is it that you love to do that you could possibly create a business for yourself and for your household? Is there something that you've always wanted to do that you didn't have time to do before? One of the things that I always wanted to do before I was not working in corporate America, I always wanted to write, but I never felt like I had time. So, that this might be that time for you to write those books you've always wanted to write. Maybe you love to draw or paint. Maybe this is the time to start that business with those paintings and those drawings. Maybe you love to rehab furniture. This may be a time to learn to get that skill sharpened and rehab that furniture, and you can sell it. So you're creating something for yourself and your family. For anybody who maybe doesn't have a college degree and you feel like your skills are good, but you need something more to boost up your background of your education, or to boost up your resume, or to just even grow and into a situation where you can start a business. If you want to be a coach or some other thing, I want to encourage you to tap into these resources. So a lot of universities have free programs that you can take advantage of. There are a lot of free classes that you can take. So I want to encourage you, find out if there's a class that lines up with the type of business that you want to start. Take some of those classes. If you want to take it to the next level, get into the class and upgrade to the certificate program. So you would have to pay for that certificate, but most of those certificates are under $500. Many of them are even under $300. Tap into your people resources. Make a list of people in your life that, if you were faced with a medical diagnosis or a situation where you needed to work, is there people in your life who could utilize the skills that you have? If you know that there are people in your life who could, maybe you do home health care, maybe you are excellent at cleaning, are there people in your life who would love to have someone else to clean their home? If that's you, then utilize that skill to create income for yourself as you navigate your medical situation. If you are the person who's dealing with the illness and you don't have someone else in your home, again, look into things that you can do online. Right now, because of this pandemic, a lot of jobs are available online. So I just want to encourage you, tap into your resources, use your people resources, take advantage of free classes at different universities. Go to sites like Groupon. A lot of times they have classes on there at a very affordable price. Use your social media outlets to make sure that you can rehab, your life and your career process as you navigate your medical diagnosis. As I prepare to close out, I just want to thank you. If you would like to reach out, my information will be made available to you so that you can reach out for a coaching session or any other thing that you may need. If you have questions for more information, I will be happy to answer those questions for you. Thank you so much for taking time to listen. And thank you again, Karen, for the opportunity to share.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. You have shared some key vital information. And, you may not realize it, but God has been having a message that's been going throughout all of the speakers.
Mm.
And I love when that happens. As I was listening to you, I was taking down some notes. You didn't use these exact words, but you were talking about that they need to renew their minds.
Yes, ma'am.
They have to be able to think outside the box and be able to get with God, figure out how am I going to navigate through this medical diagnosis without causing additional trauma to my family, without breaking down my marriage. You also talked about that you need a plan to be prepared. Another young lady was talking exactly about being prepared and that we need to have a plan. And then throughout the whole conference, it's been communicate. Don't nobody know what you need unless you open your mouth. And so everybody has been saying the same thing. And I'm just so excited because I love when God does that. I love when he just puts a plan together and we think it was our original idea. But no, he's been weaving and working his way through that whole thing. And so the other thing too that you that I wanted to add to what you were saying was that every state has a Department of Rehabilitation Services, the vocational rehab services. A lot of our audience that may be low income could benefit and qualify for those services, to be able to have someone help them with identifying those transferable skills. They can get a vocational evaluation and other support services through those state agencies. And so you don't have to go through any of this alone. You have, my organization, Rehab Your Life, you have your organization. And so we are available to be able to help to get people to see that you can rehab your life after a major medical diagnosis.
Absolutely.
So I know that you have made some gifts and giveaways available. At the end of each day, I'm going to share who is the winner of that. So I definitely want you guys to continue to participate and let us know you're in the chat so that way we can engage with you. And so thank you so much, Voyd, for your expertise and making yourself available to participate in the 2020 Rehab Your Life Summit.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate you.
You're welcome.